It's still above 1,000 for a kg, but it's better than when we had 2,000 just, I think last week. We're still struggling with high prices, and the week before that. And we're told that since last week we've been having supplies into the country, into Lagos State and some of those major cities, and that is the reason that the price has been reducing. However, on the other side, the government has warned petroleum products marketers to reduce prices. But of course, you know that it's a deregulated environment when we talk about petroleum products, so the government cannot enforce legally reduction in prices one way or the other. It's people's businesses, and they have the right in this environment to choose how they sell it, demand and supply. That's the environment we're running. That's what the law says, since it's been deregulated. And but we know that the global price of oil has gone down. Yes, we're talking about more than $100 for Brent. Now we're talking about $72. We've seen the price continue to drop. How long does it take for a drop in the price of global crude to translate into petrol at the pump? If it was an increase, we would not have to have this conversation, because we'd already feel the price and see it even before now. Let's talk to Dumebi. Dumebi Oluwole is the research manager, financial derivatives company, joins us from London. Dumebi, how much is gas there? This is a global problem. The Strait of Hormuz is affecting everybody from the UK to the US, of course, to Nigeria. Has it reduced there?
Well, just slightly. I use the bus system and the train system, so I would say I'm kind of immune to yeah, but I think right now we're actually seeing prices subtly, soften, especially supermarket prices for some commodities like eggs, milk. They're beginning to, soften from what we were experiencing before. Energy prices are just relatively stagnant. We haven't seen such a drastic change. And in terms of LNG, because this is the summertime, so heaters are off, there's less demand.
Yeah. So back here in Nigeria, we're beginning to get a little bit of relief. But when it comes to petrol, even the government has had to complain that the rate of reduction doesn't match the reduction in the price of global oil. Perhaps, what's that thing? They call it the lag between the policy to the reality.
I think you're very spot on that. That's exactly the first thing I was going to lead with, which is the lag. But I guess it's also important that we, contextualize what exactly is happening and why it is happening the way it is happening. So the first thing is looking at, let's start with LNG prices, right? So we've seen natural gas prices significantly fall, and the major reason for that is less demand for heating. So across Europe, the UK, and to some extent in some Asian countries, we're seeing like a heat wave, right? As of a few days ago, last week specifically, schools were not opening, offices were saying everyone could just decide to work from home simply because of how hot it was, right? So the fact that there is no demand for for heating is of course reducing demand globally for LNG, and that in itself is affecting prices. With LNG prices falling, that's one of the reasons why we're now seeing cooking gas, prices also fall. So it's that straight or direct market link between what's happening globally, the increase in supply in Nigeria, because now, Naira is stable, plus the fact that, global prices are falling. That's clearly supporting LPG prices cooking gas prices in Nigeria. And the expectation on that level is that the trend will likely continue, especially as summer period, continues. Over the next couple of weeks, there's still expectation of a very hot weather, especially in July. So we could still see LNG prices fall further. But as we head into September, where the weather would likely, get colder and heating demand begins to pick up, we might see LPG prices also increase in tandem. Now, speaking to petrol prices, the biggest factor I would say that's happening here is uncertainty. So the first thing is the memorandum of understanding between the US and Iran hasn't necessarily equated to an agreement from both parties. And just yesterday, there were still issues around strikes from both parties within the Strait of Hormuz, right? So that uncertainty is what the market is pricing in, and that's why we're not seeing petrol prices fall as quickly as we saw, crude oil prices fall. In fact, there are reports that are saying that it's almost like the market was trigger happy, and that's why we saw Brent prices fall significantly, right, from about 120 barrels that it was, when the war started, to about $72 per barrel that we're discussing today. So the trigger happiness in the markets is beginning to subside, because it seems like everyone is now being realistic on the fact that the uncertainty of the war, whether it's going to stop or not, is now the question that we're all asking ourselves today. And so that uncertainty in answering whether yes or no, because the markets right now is saying, I don't know, that's exactly why we're seeing this situation happen. And we're, of course, seeing it in the Nigerian market as well. Beyond the FG even complaining about the fact that prices haven't fallen as much, President Trump as well also said the same thing a few days ago. So it's not just a Nigeria-specific issue, it's a global issue. And I think this will actually persist in the near term.
Yeah, and Dumebi, have we heard anything about the Doha talks? Any sentiment from there? We're just waiting blindly until the major parties decide to spill something from there.
Honestly speaking, I think everyone is, applying a wait and see approach at this point, because again, like I said, the markets were trigger happy. Even I myself, I came here and I said that, with the memorandum of understanding and Pakistan being involved, with the green lights that we're seeing, the expectation is that prices will fall further and we should see that replicate in the market. But unfortunately, a few days after I said that, strikes happened again. So the markets are now, of course, becoming more sensitive around uncertainty, which is I will say, which has become the way of the world right now, especially when you consider the US-Iran situation. Uncertainty really is where we all are. And unfortunately, there's no easy way to measure uncertainty, and so the markets are just moving as the news come out. So right now, in terms of the Doha talks, everyone is just waiting for, everyone to say something, or at least one person to say something.
One person say something, depending on who. But I guess that is why the marketers are not in a hurry to reduce their price so much. Although this morning I did notice there's a little bit of reduction in some of the petrol stations on my way. I believe here in Lagos, about 1,100. I think that's what I saw, away from 1,200. But even with all of the FCCPC, they had shared their warning and concerns. The federal government now, people are like, let's see really what happens in Doha. If there will not be another meeting, this is like the third one that we're having. If something concrete will come out of it, but mine is to maybe, if it was an increase, they'll be fast to increase, and they won't wait to see if perhaps it's a temporal strike or temporal problem.
You're not wrong there, and I think it's the uniqueness of a developing market like Nigeria, where we see that prices are very quick to rise and very slow to fall. So that downward stickiness, I would say, is the reason why FCCPC is saying what they're saying, because at this point they of course have to consider consumer protection and how this uncertain moves with the marketers and other retailers, how it is ideally affecting the broader consumer market in Nigeria. Where I think what I think about the situation is that there has to be more conversations with the stakeholders, and an understanding of the business priorities and the consumer base is extremely important, so that there's enough balance. Because issuing out a statement, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think it moves the needle. What I think it does is that it, of course, rattles the market even more and raises questions about the policy that we have made and the reforms that we have made in deregulating the market. And that in itself could come back to bite us when you look at investor confidence and how easy it will be investing in the downstream petroleum sector in Nigeria. And I don't think that we want to restart those conversations following the success of the Dangote refinery. So I think that there has to be more conversations at stakeholder level, and what we should ideally be seeing is a consensus from both parties on an issued statement regarding how best to proceed. And I think this also speaks broadly to the issues around communication and transparency with the public, and not just with FCCPC now, but across all ministry development and agencies, simply because this lack, or I would say the slow ride towards that level of transparency around institutional understanding, around sensitizing people, and actually, being using plain English to just really explain what exactly is going on is still significantly lacking. And this is one of the reasons why we tend to see panic buying a lot of times, tend to see a lot of shocks, within Nigeria's consumer market. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong for issuing the statement or wrong for actually raising the issues, because when you even look at the numbers, you see that petrol prices in Nigeria increased about 49% following the increase in global oil prices, which was around 60%. But petrol prices are falling about 39% globally, but in Nigeria, it has only fallen about between 14 to 20% across different markets. So you see where the gap is coming from. But in my opinion, I think the consolidation should be between the stakeholders, and what the public should be hearing is a synchronized assessment of what exactly is going on, and an issue statement to continually ensure that the public is, that there's no tension, in the public space.
But I mean, whatever way we want to look at it, it all feeds back to the price of commodities. The essentials remain high or keep increasing, even if it's at a slower rate. But we see prices increasing, and of course, that's squeezing purchasing power of households.
Yes, you're very right there. And I think beyond the issue around petrol prices or energy prices, I think it's also important that we isolate the various issues that are leading to these problems of significant increase in other commodity prices. Petrol price is just one of the factors driving this issue. In my opinion, the biggest issue today is insecurity. You cannot produce small and expect to sell big. It doesn't work that way, right? And our local farmers, our primary producers, are finding it very difficult to produce and sell, right? So the issue around, domestic production is extremely, extremely intricate. And in fact, I will say that is the biggest problem that the inflation story or commodity story in Nigeria faces today. And until we get that right, I don't think that there will be a point where the increase in petrol prices, or we see the naira, depreciating today. I don't think that those issues will surmount that at least in the near term, simply because the food production story starts from the farms. And unfortunately, we're having issues there, significant issues there. Farmers are losing at least 50% of their harvest, or they're not able to replant, right? So it's a very, very big issue. So directly from the farms, prices have already increased by over 50%. Before you now think of adding petrol prices or logistics cost or the impact of the naira, which in itself has even been muted over the last couple of months, right? So I think the inflation story today, in my opinion, really, really starts from the farms. And I think that until we get that right, the conversation and issues around consumer protection, inflation, I think we will still largely have those problems. And the antidote, in my opinion, apart from solving the issues from the farms, is when we look at the broader, needs of man, addressing issues around food, addressing issues around shelter, addressing issues around even water and safety, until the federal government spends time to just simplify whatever model it is towards these core issues of man, and then decide to start addressing the biggest issues across those 5 key things. I think that, again, these conversations will continue to happen.
All right, Dumebi. Well, we'll continue to have the conversations and hope that one day it will become reality, solution, and then we would enjoy it. Thank you so much, Dumebi, for joining us from London.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's take a break now. We'll stay in the UK, one way or the other. But we'll take a break now. When we come back, we have another conversation that will be from Nigeria but connected to the United Kingdom. Please stay with us.